Hi everyone, welcome back to the new episode of Mindful Minute. I'm Gabby, and today I am going to be chatting with my friend Wenwei. We met the other day through another friend of ours, so here we are.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Of course. So as you guys all know, I'm very passionate about mental health and self-care, and I was really happy to know that there was another person that was obviously very passionate about it too. So, Wenwei, if you don't mind, can you just share with everybody kind of your self-care routine and what you do to kind of de-stress?
Yeah, absolutely. So, for me, the most important part of my self care routine is to be intentional about living a sustainable life so that I feel balanced. So, for me, that entails strong boundaries, great times with friends, great times by myself, and the ability to give myself permission to say, no, I'm not doing this today.
Yes.
I really started to value self care when my friends invited me to play Dungeons and Dragons with them. And this is going to sound really silly, but for me, it was a great experience because I don't know if you really know anything about Dungeons and Dragons, but it is a tabletop role playing game set in a fantasy world full of a bunch of not very inclusive fantasy tropes. And it has always been a world that has interested me, but it's never something that I really felt included in. And my friend really wanted to play, and she took the time to print me some 3D dice because the thing with Dungeons and Dragons is apart from the fantasy tropes, you need a lot of material. Like you need dice, you need maps that I may or may not be able to read. You need a dungeon master who is the storyteller who is going to actually include you and not subjugate you to a lot of gendered stereotypes or some sort of preconceived notion of like who I am and the character that I choose to play. So my friend was like, Wenwei, I really want to play this game with you. I think you'd have a really great time. And she just wanted me to experience this with her because this is what she loves. So I was really lucky because she's an excellent storyteller. Dungeon masters are responsible for telling the story and also responsible for playing everyone else's character. So she really modeled this in a way for me where I felt really included and valued, and I didn't feel stressed out for being in this space that I wasn't familiar with. And it was just such a great time, and it has really sustained me throughout some of the other things that I've been doing for work. So, that's when I really started to learn that self care is really rigorous and intentional.
Mm-hmm.
You have to go out of your way to make people feel included and to allow them to be in that safe space so that they can thrive and simply just have a great time. And that's something that I really try to model for other people and for other people that I care about that day going forward. So I'm intentional about who I spend my time with. I'm intentional about like what I share or like being strategically vulnerable with them. And I'm intentional about making sure that I get time to myself so that I can restore my energy levels and prepare for the next day's activities.
I get that 100%. I feel like self-care is such an important thing for so many reasons. It's like you get to learn about the things that you tolerate and the things that you don't tolerate. And I think that it took me a while too to really learn what that was and really talk about even I did an episode the other day talking about setting boundaries, because that's another thing that I think so many people skip over in their self-care journey.
Yeah, boundary setting is really important. And it has become even more prevalent during the pandemic because people might think, well, what else do you have to do? And that's when you realize that then people won't impose on your time. Because even if you do have time, you don't have time.
Yeah, I mean, so, also, if you wouldn't mind, like, sharing kind of like, I know you kind of touched on it a little bit, but like, where in your life you kind of notice like self care is like what I need for myself to, kind of protect your peace, protect your energy and your space and your time.
Um, sure. So I learned about valuing myself through some personal and professional relationships that I've had over the years. I've just had some friends who didn't really value or validate me, and that was a very challenging time in my life, and it was difficult to grapple with those feelings. And I've had some working relationships where my client would not respect my time. She assumed that because she was paying me that my time was her time and
Mm-hmm.
could treat it the way that she pleased. And after handling this situation for an entire month, I realized that if I don't respect my time, then nobody will. So I realized that I needed to set some boundaries for myself, very clearly name those boundaries in both a personal and professional capacity. And if people don't respect those boundaries, then they just don't have a right to my time.
Yes, I get
Yeah.
that 100%. So for me, it was kind of the same. Although for me, I really noticed like in certain friendships too, it was like people would come to me and be like, "Oh, help me get through this situation," or "Help me, figure out like how to solve my problem." And it was like, "Okay, like I will help you," but then it's like I noticed that like when I needed help with things or when I needed support, a lot of people that were my quote unquote friends just like weren't there for me. And that was hard for me to really kind of cope with because
Yeah.
it was like when I'm like in friendships and things like that, like I care and love people very deeply and I, dedicate a lot of my time and energy
Mm-hmm.
into being there for those people. And
Yeah.
it was hard for me to really like cope with that for a while. Also just like my anxious brain was just like, "Oh, like, it's fine. Like these people are just going through their own thing." But in reality, it was really just like no, you didn't set that boundary for yourself. So like
Yeah.
now all these people are going to violate that and like take up that space and that time because you didn't tell them no. And
Right. It's like you
yeah.
signed that dotted line giving them permission to do whatever it is that they were doing. Yeah. So,
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And so I think for me it was that too. Also
mm-hmm.
realizing that like, I even if I am there for people, which, it's like I will support my friends, I'll support people in my family, all that fun stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
also, I realized like I was doing that so much for people to the point where I was like, I don't feel like, I've taken good care of myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was another thing. I was just like, I need to not constantly like spread myself thin this way. Also just like a lot of toxicity in my school that I went to and just
Yeah.
like how I felt like I was being treated. That was kind of just all like the turning points in my life where I was like my self-care matters so much more than anything and prioritizing yourself like that doesn't make you selfish or that doesn't mean that you don't want to still support the people in your life. It just simply means that like you are doing that so much to the point where you just keep forgetting to take care of yourself. So,
Yeah. And honestly, you can't really be a good friend if you don't prioritize yourself. So I had a recent friendship breakup. Well, I
mhm,
guess it wasn't that recent ago, but like the pandemic, you know. It was like just before the pandemic, and I had a friend who something very similar. She would always seem to worry about everybody but herself, and for me, like when I needed a friend, and I just felt like I was not asking very much of her, and she would never make time for me, and yet she
mhm,
would drive like 3 hours to go hang out with coworkers or whatever, and I'm
right.
just like, okay, what is this? So,
Yeah, like I see like where I fall in your,
yeah,
kind of, yeah, yeah,
yeah. And so going back to friendships and sustainable friendships, it's like that was not sustainable for me. I need to be around people who value me just as much as I value them.
Yeah.
So what my friends and I do is we'll sit around for how many minutes a day and send each other videos or songs or whatever. Like we will check in with each other. I know about their day to day lives. One
Right.
of my best friends and I, which is hilarious, like for anyone who knows me personally, we decided to go on like 10 dates in 6 days, which we didn't make it through those 10 days. But what we ultimately wanted was more time together. So we
Mm-hmm.
have dedicated time together.
Right.
And we're very, very intentional about making sure that that happens. And if it doesn't happen, we'll check in with each other like, hey, what's going on?
Mm-hmm.
Like, are you just busy? Are you upset? And I just feel really loved and cared for. I just feel, again, personally sustained. So,
Yeah. No, I
yeah.
get that. Because I also just learning about friendships and really like seeing the people in your life who will be there for you through anything.
Mm-hmm.
And like one of my best friends, I've known her since middle school, and then she moved and left New York, and like to this day we're still in contact. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like it's those friendships where you know like even if you go a week or 2 weeks or a month without like talking to each other, even just checking in, but just getting on the phone and just picking up the conversation like nothing, like no time has passed. I feel like that is
Exactly. Yeah.
like one of the most amazing feelings because it just shows that like this person understands that like you are busy, they're busy, you have schedules, you have, jobs, you have school, you have family and life and friends, and it's like once they kind of understand that like they too are going through their own problems, it's like then you can both kind of sit down on the phone and just be like, well, let me tell you about what's been going on in my life since the last time we spoke. And
Mm-hmm.
having, and also like with my other best friends, I talk to her pretty much almost every day.
Mm-hmm.
But she's still in college. This is her senior year, so like she hasn't really been, she's been kind of focusing on what she needs to focus on, and same with me.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll send each other audio messages because we found that like that's what works for us, and like that's how
Mm-hmm.
we are able to kind of just be like, hey, like miss you, hope you're doing good. Feel free to update me when you can,
Yeah.
and like it all just like kind of works out because again, then you can get on the phone at some point and just be like, well, yeah, it's been a really long time since we
Mm-hmm.
actually like had a conversation. But no, it's true like having people in your life and in your circle who are supportive of you and just
Mm-hmm.
your, whatever it is, just I think that is also when I learned that like these are the people that will support me and be there for me
Mm-hmm.
through anything.
Exactly. Like for me, it's like who am I gonna call when I want to celebrate, and who am I gonna call when I just want to cry? You know what I mean? Like those
Mhm.
are like the
Yes.
same people. I want to
Yes.
both celebrate them, be celebrated by them, and like cry with them.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
exactly.
yeah,
100%.
yeah.
Is there anything you want to kind of share with everybody? I know that you and I were talking about like kind of reframing your narrative and what that kind of represents for you and what that means to you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Um, So, I belong to two intersecting communities,
Mhm.
and I have been in an environment that has been really detrimental to my mental health, where I did not receive a lot of personal and professional support from the people around me. I am also blind and I'm Asian American, and people around me would say things like, oh, well, you're really pretty because you're Chinese, or oh, wow, you're really smart because you're Chinese, or wow,
Mhm.
you can do all these things because you're blind. In other words, like people not having very high expectations of me,
Right.
or oh, well, Wenwei, we can't do these things for you because, like, I can't slow down the entire curriculum for you. In other words, like,
Mhm.
we live in a very ableist society.
Oh
So
yeah.
it was like, on the one hand, I felt pressured to do everything on my own. But on the other hand, people were just like, oh, well, I don't need to, like, support you or anything because you're already really smart.
Mhm.
And like the people who were supposed to support me in a professional capacity were like, yeah, I'll do whatever it is that I
Yeah.
can. And yet they didn't because
Mhm.
they
Yep.
either didn't take the time to understand what I needed or sort of impose some sort of like ableist concept of like understanding on me and didn't present material in a way that was accessible to me.
Right.
So that was hard. I spent a lot of time sort of sifting through my emotions
Right.
and trying to be honest with myself. I know that in previous episodes you've talked about the importance of self reflection
Mhm.
and ask myself, like, how much of this was like my fault and how much of this was a result of the system
Right.
and a result of people not really listening to me.
Yeah.
Because there came a point when I just stopped doing things. I was like, nope, not doing this anymore. It doesn't matter.
Mhm. Yeah,
Um,
I get that. Me too.
and currently, I am a content editor. I teach ESL online, and I'm not accommodated in that space either. But because I have gone out of my way to surround myself with people who love and care about me, and anything I'd like to do, for instance, play Dungeons and Dragons, crochet, any other creative pursuits that I'm interested in, I do it for like myself. So I surround myself with people who both make me laugh and challenge me. And I took the time to tell my family, like, hey, this is how you made me feel.
Mhm.
And I would really appreciate it if you would do better. And
Right.
I am starting to see the fruits of my labor and for them to realize that they did not support me in the way that they should have.
Mhm.
So it took a lot of work to reframe my own story and to say, one way your intelligence is not predetermined by your academic record or by how quickly you were able to complete tasks
Mhm.
through some sort of like ableist lens
Right.
and how well you understood some extremely difficult and visual concept when it wasn't presented in a manner that was accessible to you.
Yeah.
And it took a very, very long time to own the fact that I am very good at my job and what I do, and it is in part a result of training and opportunities that were given to me, and also partially because I worked really hard. And I've seen some tangible proof of my success, meaning, financial success and
Mhm.
clients who I work with who recommend me to their friends or professional network. And that does mean a lot.
Yeah.
And it has, in terms of my professional success, has really helped me to tell myself that I am intelligent,
Mhm.
I'm funny, I'm a good friend, and I have something valuable to offer.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And as an aside, this noise that you hear in the background, it's me playing with the dice that my friend very generously made for me. So,
Yeah, I want to go back to something that you mentioned just about like the support that you received because I don't I kind of discussed this one here and there, but I haven't really fully like opened up and spoke about it, but like in college it was literally the most like roughest point in my life because I think I don't want to sound crazy, but I genuinely think that like college gave me anxiety because I I felt like, I was advocating so much and it was like the end result was just always the same. Like nothing would change. Professors would still be really rude and not accommodate me. And it was like and also I think I mentioned this in the episode that I put out the other day, Finding Courage, or one of the other ones I did. But also like knowing that like I dedicated so much of my time to that school and I gave so much of my just, shared so much of my talents with people. I performed at a bunch of events and stuff like that as a freshman. And I think by sophomore year, that was kind of when I was like, okay, this is really not great, because it's not like it wasn't like a, okay, I'll do this for you, you have to do this thing for me situation, but it was kind of like, I'm going out of my way to dedicate my time and everything that I have like worked to accomplish and to do. But like, just other than that, just like, I was doing it for fun and because I loved it. But then sophomore year, I was like, yeah, I don't think I'm gonna do that anymore, because it was just like, I wasn't getting the the like the help that I really did need. I won't say that like there were people there that I like genuinely like love and care about, and who like genuinely did support me and like still support me, and that was amazing, and I was so grateful for them. But like, the people that I really needed the support from in that building were just like, nope, we're not going to help you because we don't think that, you need accommodations, and just all these other things. And so that was kind of when I learned like setting boundaries and like what that was for me, and like reframing my story as well. And just also just growing up, like people, especially like sighted people that were like, oh, you're not going to be able to do this thing because you're blind. Like, my vision teacher basically degraded me before going into college, because she's like, well, your grades aren't that great, and like your GPA is pretty low, so like chances are you're not going to get into this college. And then when I got in, she was like, oh my God, I'm so proud of you. And I was like, yeah.
Yeah. You touched on a really important point where the people who are in a position to support you and to cultivate your skill set didn't, because of some ableist notion of success, and some institutionalized notion of success. And I have had my own stories, and that is something that's really hard to get past, especially
Yeah.
when that's been beaten into you for so long, when you're at the the pinnacle point in your education where what you do, who you meet, what you study, that really matters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
And so,
exactly.
yeah. So in my role as a tutor and just things that I do in my personal life, like anytime I see someone who has talent or something, and especially like in my role as a professional where I have a lot of authority and a lot of influence, and I can really make a huge impact, either a positive or a negative impact. I'm very careful about how I give feedback,
Yeah.
and my professional opinion does matter. It carries a lot of weight, and I'm very careful about how I frame criticism and how I might encourage somebody to do better. Like, I'm a very critical person. I don't mean like, I think critical is overused as a word and
Yeah.
people don't always use it correctly. Like, I'm very critical in the sense that I'm very specific about my positive feedback, and I'm also specific about my feedback when someone is doing is ineffective. So,
Yeah.
I have a client who has a reading disability, and I mean, apart from the fact that I get paid really well, I really enjoyed working with him because I get to do something for him that no one did for me,
Right.
which is just listen to them. And he's really thrived over the last like couple of months, and I'm really proud of him and the work that we've done.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I get that. I feel like for me, like, because of the fact that a lot of people looked at me and were like, this girl, this blind girl, like, how is she gonna impact people in her life, And it was just like very degrading and like very kind of like, okay, well, I see that like you really genuinely don't care and like don't care to support me. And once I kind of learned like how to navigate past that, I was able to be like, okay, well, those people just don't need to be in my circle. Those people don't need to be the people that I turn to in situations. And so now, like, I'm working on like creating my business and building up my business, and I'm also like just trying to just network with more people. And I think that like it's taught me just the importance of not only just networking, but it's also taught me the importance of how you impact other people's lives. It's like you were saying, like with your clients and just how you give your feedback. Just I don't think a lot of people notice, like they do have an impact on the people in their that they interact with. Like you do have an impact on those people's lives, whether you know it or not. And so that's one of the reasons I really want to be a motivational speaker, is because I want to be able to share my story, not
Hmm.
just to inspire, but also to just let people know, like, treat people with kindness, whether it's a person with or without a disability. You just don't know what that person is dealing with in their life. So yeah.
Yeah, a little courtesy goes a long way.
Speaking of support, I want to talk about just the support in and me and Wenwei's community, which is the blind community. I have okay, I won't lie, there are people in this community who are very supportive of me, and those are the people that are like closest to me and the people that know me. But I also have found that there are people who I've known and who I've met and interacted with who are just not so good for my mental health. So I'm gonna I'm gonna kind of hand it over to Wenwei because she has some stories as well, and I'm sure she'll be able to talk more about it as well.
Well, that's interesting that you say that because I have not had a lot of interaction with the blind community for various reasons. Chief among them that they have been very degrading. And if you ever ask someone a question, they're kind of condescending in their response,
Mm-hmm.
which makes you feel as if you didn't have some access to something, like whether it was knowledge, sort of that like
Right.
unspoken knowledge that really does need to be taught.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't know if you've met these kind of people, Gabby, in panels or at events where people might say, like, oh, so where did you go to college? What did you study? Where did you work? How much money are you making as a blind person? Like, how successful are you? Are you someone
Mm-hmm.
that I should associate with because you've experienced a measure of professional success and therefore you're intelligent? I've always thought that I would always just be isolated doing whatever it is that I wanted to do. And
Mm-hmm.
if I made it, that's cool. And that means that I'm one of the good ones.
Yeah.
A lot of people would discuss in forums how no one would ever spend any time with blind people because blah 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 blah. Like we don't have
Mm-hmm.
any interests. It's like a completely different subset of human or something. It's ridiculous.
It is.
So I'm like, I don't want to associate with them. Or you meet people whose skill sets are markedly different from yours and you just cannot connect with them. So, for this reason, I've never really made an effort to meet anyone in the blind community because they either stressed me out, made me feel like I was incompetent, or just we didn't have any mutual interests.
Yeah.
So Gabby and I actually met online.
Mm-hmm.
Funny how that works. And I met a lot of really interesting people who have all formed their own community of people who have wildly different personalities,
Mm-hmm.
levels of skill set, and interests. So I feel like in the last few months I've been learning a very valuable lesson in like community, this kind of community that I've always cultivated with my friends in real life. You know what I mean? Like to find
Yeah.
this space online has been quite fascinating.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
So, hanging out with a bunch of blind people online isn't going to make me undergo a panic attack every 5 seconds. Like, it's good to know that, you don't need to draw a very strict dichotomy. Like, there are two types of blind people. There are the
Right.
shitty ones, or there are the ones who you just cannot connect with for whatever reason. So, therefore, you don't. That has been a misconception that I've been slowly stepping away from through some of my extracurricular academic reading and also through personal experience. That And it's just like, it's more nuanced than that.
No, but I get what you're saying though, because I won't lie, like I have known people in the community who I just felt like I just couldn't, you know, I don't want to use the word tolerate because I feel like that's like just a mean term to use. I just felt like I had to set, again, it goes back to setting boundaries. It's like you have to set some sort of limit with like how much you are, I guess I could use the word tolerate, how much you are going to tolerate and how much you know, your limit, like what your limit is. And I think like everything you mentioned too is like just, you know, getting the support from people. I think I've also learned this with my YouTube channel. It's like I see that there's so many blind YouTubers who are gaining such like success and they like have like brand new YouTube channels and they have like 1 point something thousand subscribers and I'm just like it's it's not like I don't want to sound like I'm being jealous cuz like I'm not that type of person, but it's just like when you are working so hard and putting in so much of your time and effort to something and like you just kind of see that like these people are gaining like instant success, it's just kind of like okay, well, like where did I go wrong, you know, like what am I not doing for these people to connect with me or for these people to interact with my content. And so it's like I like that's one of the reasons I put that Finding Courage When You Feel Discouraged podcast up the other day, because genuinely like I was feeling very discouraged about like my channel and just like my business and what it like, well, you know, I haven't started my business fully, but like it's kind of getting places bit by bit, but like you know, like things like that. And it's just like it's hard, like I said, when you just kind of compare yourself, I guess not really comparing yourself, but like when you kind of have these expectations of yourself and you know that you can do something, but then you find that there's people, especially like on YouTube and in the blind community, who have gained that kind of level of, okay, like I've hit that expectation that I wanted to make. And it's like, when you're not at that expectation, it's kind of like, okay, well then maybe I shouldn't be doing this. You know what I mean? So, yeah, but I get what you're saying though about like just being meeting people and support and just like just all those kind of things. So yeah, do you want to say anything though to kind of like wrap up?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that everything that everyone has done online, or you know, every like the professional success that we enjoy, or the friendships that we have around us, they take rigorous,
Mhm.
intentional work, and sometimes it's just hard to remember that, especially when you sort of see how effortless it might look for someone else. And that's just something that I kind of remind myself every day. Like, if I don't do the work, or if I don't react in a certain way to stress, or if I do react in a certain way to stress, you know, like that is on me,
Mhm.
in whatever form that might take.
Right.
And that is the only thing I really like have control over. Recently, I had a friend who I wasn't sure our friendship was going to survive, and I decided to talk to her about it, and it did, because I took the initiative and told her how I felt.
Yeah.
In terms of like my clients, I put a lot of effort into demonstrating my skill set, and I get paid because people see tangible results.
Yeah.
And my mannerisms make people comfortable learning the skills that they need to learn from me and making mistakes, so they trust me to have their best interests in mind, and they believe in my work well enough when I tell them that they need to either step up their A game or do something else.
Right.
And that takes a lot of work and planning.
Yeah. For
And
sure.
with the crocheting that I do, I didn't learn crocheting overnight. And the shawls and the embroidery that I made my friends, the process in doing that took a lot of work too.
Mhm.
And that's just sort of what I tell myself. Like, sometimes people get really lucky and they say yes to the right circumstances, but as a marginalized member of society, particularly one who belongs to several different intersections of marginalization,
Mhm.
you have to work twice as hard to make it. And that is what I tell myself every day, and that is how I support my friends or my clients, depending on what my role is. Like sometimes my friends and I will get ice cream, and sometimes I will just remind my clients, this is what you've done. And
Right.
that is really what self care is to me. Like
Yeah.
just being intentional about what you do, how you say it, managing your mental health, and investing in yourself
Mhm.
so that you can have the energy and headspace to invest in other people who will in turn invest in you to create this community of care.
Yeah, I love that. I definitely understand what you're saying. I'm also gonna say like I agree. You know, it's like when you are a woman and you're blind, and for me it's like I'm a woman of color, and
Same.
I'm also, yeah, and so like, you know, when you're a woman of color, you're blind, and like all those things, it's like these are kind of like a trifecta stereotype of like what people kind of look at you as. They're like, oh, well, that person is blind and she's, you know, a person of color. And so, like, I don't know how I feel about this person. But then I think just from me learning to just what I can bring to the table and developing my skills and, you know, the assets that I can really apply to just things that I do, I think that it's shown me that, like, yes, people are going to have these ideas of you. They're going to think whatever they want about you. But, like, if you know what you can do and what you can bring to the table, it's like, then at that point, it's kind of like, you know, you don't really need to. It's hard to, I guess, what I'm trying to say. Let me stop and say that again. When you know what you can kind of bring to the table and you know your level of like, you know, your skills and things, it's like then you can kind of take that and say, well, this is what I'm going to do and this is how I'm going to utilize those things and this is how I choose to move forward and look at situations going forward. And I think that I've learned so much of that from my family too and from friends and from just my own like mental health and yeah. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I just like carry myself in a certain manner, especially in
mhm.
work. I don't know, my personal life, it's a little debatable, but in a work setting, I I'm confident, I'm put together,
Yeah.
and I'm completely focused on the task at hand.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I just dial down my anxiety because I'm being paid to do a job, so I better do that job. And that's that's what really helps. And I would
Yeah.
love to have that attitude translate into my personal life as well. But that's what my self care routine is for, so that I feel balanced and loved and cared for and sane.
Mhm. For
Yeah.
sure.
But Gabby, I haven't known you for very long, but it has been such a pleasure getting to know you and chatting with you on Zoom.
Yes, you too. Yeah, it's crazy how much we have in common, but yeah, it's been really nice getting to like connect with you as well, and you know, just hearing about your own story and all that fun stuff. But yeah, thank you so much, Wenwei, for joining me here today. I really appreciate you coming and sharing your story and advice with people. Do you have anything like where people can find you? Are you on social media? Anything like that?
Mm, I don't really. I'm on WeChat for work. I mean, I
Gotcha.
guess if you want, you can follow my personal Twitter. It's at underscore Wenwei underscore. That's underscore WENWEI underscore. I just tweet about my day to day life and just things that I'm learning along the way.
Yeah.
So if you really want to read about that, you can, I suppose.
Okay. Thank you so much, Wenwei.
Thank you for having me.
No problem.